A challenge that's been a staple on Drag Race since season 2 is the acting challenge. These challenges give the queens a script in order to memorize and then perform on a set. And for it being such a staple of Drag Race, it is shocking how many people despise these challenges. I asked my viewers whether or not they enjoyed the acting challenges on Drag Race, and 70% of them said no. Obviously, I don't think every person hates every single acting challenge, but the overwhelming answer for a lot of these challenges is no. And I believe there's a couple reasons why, which I want to get into today. But first, I'm working my way towards 50k subscribers, so if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing. I think the most obvious reason why these acting challenges aren't really well liked is because the writing can be very iffy at times. The poor writing hurts both the competition and the entertainment, but let's talk about the entertainment first. At the least, we expect the product of these challenges to be funny, but that's not even guaranteed a lot of the time. There are some challenges that have some pretty funny writing, like the telenovela challenge from season 5, but most of them rely on dated references, flimsy parodies, or a lot of sex jokes. The parody aspect especially can really tank the entertainment value of each challenge. One of my favorites is the Get Out parody from season 11 because I understood the references, but one of my least favorite is Breast World because I had no idea what was going on.
In process, setting Bianca Del Rio, baloney, going down to Ivy Winter.
And even with something like the Get Out parody, it was more humorous because I was like, oh, I get that, rather than, oh, this is a funny joke on its own. The writing just isn't strong enough a lot of the time to carry a scene without knowing the reference material, so most of the time it just drags and drags. Even something that I know a decent amount about, like American Horror Story, that went on for so long with the American Horror Story, and I just couldn't keep watching it. I partially do get why they make some of these acting challenges so long, to make sure that everyone gets their time to shine, but then a lot of them turn out like an SNL sketch that just won't end. From what I've seen in the community tab, people like the challenges that parody a whole genre rather than a specific film or TV show. And I definitely do agree with that. It's just a lot easier to understand a genre, like with Drag Race Me to Hell, it's obviously just horror, than it is to understand whatever the hell Breast World was trying to do. And then the poor pacing and the weird writing leads me into the next point about the writing. Not all parts are written equally whatsoever. I explained this a long time back in my Rusical video, basically saying that no parts are written equally, but at least in a Rusical you can rely on more of your performance physicality and maybe hitting beats. Here, you're just kind of out of luck. The best example that I keep calling back to for some reason in my recent videos is Sex and the Kitty Girl. Naomi, Latrice, and Monet were basically all playing the straight man to Trinity and Mo. For every joke that these three sort of had, the other two had a whole minute of dialogue built around them. And that's completely okay, you need the straight man in order to make the other person's jokes land, but the way it's written, it's so lopsided. We do get a much better example of this with Shay on All-Star 7 being the straight man to all the craziness of the Christmas people, but even then, I don't think you would ever put Shay in the top over someone who made Rue laugh. And something that I do want to add is that sometimes these queens just don't understand the references either. We have the classic of Gia Gunn not knowing what a DeLorean is or why the other team's was in black and white.
I found it a little funny that theirs was in black and white and ours was in color.
Do you think maybe it was in black and white because it was the 60s?
But it extends to the queen maybe not knowing the show, or the worst part, maybe a language barrier. Yeah, so a lot of the time, the queens who have the most struggle with these types of scenes are queens who don't have English as their first language. There's that barrier of reference, there's that barrier of memorization, there's that barrier of performance. There's just an extra level of obstacles that prevent these queens from giving it their best shot. Actors need to understand the material in order to give the best performance, but with Drag Race, if they don't understand the material, that's reason to put them in the bottom. So we have people floundering, maybe from a language barrier, maybe not knowing the show, and it's just something they have no control over because the writers force them into a corner. For a challenge that should be solely based on the performance and the acting chops of a queen, there are just too many factors that prevent them from giving it their all. Another factor of the entertainment value is the specific queens that are performing these roles. Sometimes it's just the perfect match and it feels like the role was written specifically for this queen. Bob's role in season 8 comes to mind. It is just the perfect role for her, while she's also just insanely talented when it comes to acting. But then you sometimes get the opposite, where a queen is cast for something that just doesn't fit them at all. I'm thinking of April on season 6.
This place is going condo. If you don't buy it, sell me up, you will.
And speaking of season 6 and casting, I want to touch on something that's kind of changed how everyone has looked at casting since this aired. After complaining in the beginning and feeling like she had the smallest role in the entire challenge, Darian Lake won. It was a hilarious role, but it also felt like it set a precedent for down the line. Like I've already touched on, no role is written equally, but there's this air of there's no small parts, just small actors, and I don't think that's always true. Sometimes you're just really not dealt that much, and we need to call that out in production, or else queens are going to continue to take hits. Aside from the actual challenge not yielding the best product, I just don't like the episodes overall either. While something like the girl group challenge or the Rusical has mystery up until the actual product, here we can kind of see where the placements are going to land from the jump. I feel like there's only been a few times where they flip the script and show someone doing really bad and then they end up doing actually good in the challenge. Kylie comes to mind. Because the struggle happens in real time rather than rehearsal, it kills a lot of the stakes of the episode. Mercedes keeps doing bad in the rehearsal, she's probably going to be in the bottom. Oh, yep, she's in the bottom. I want to see these queens come out triumphant in the end like they do in a Rusical, but the structure of these acting challenges just makes them play their cards so early. There's no final chance to see them redeem themselves on set because the set is already their final chance. So the whole middle portion of the episode is setting up the placements, and then once we get to the placements, it comes out predictable. And then in between that, we have the runway and the finished product, and if the finished product isn't entertaining, the whole episode just feels like a waste. Again, I just feel like the best example is Sex in the Kitty Girl. We see who's struggling on set, we see who's easily going to be in the top 2, and we know who's going to get eliminated at the end because they are playing fairly. The saving grace would be if the product is actually funny, and oh, it's somehow one of the worst of the series. So with all of this being said, is there a way to fix these challenges? Yes and no. The fundamental structure of the challenge just doesn't really warrant everyone being successful, but I think there's still a way to make them entertaining in the end. One way is to make the directors actually direct them instead of just sitting there to push placements. Sometimes Michelle will give the best advice to a queen and make them successful, while other times she'll tell them one thing and then they don't get it and then she's like, okay, we're moving on. Janixa Bravo was one of the best directors that we've seen on the show, and she really wanted to see all the queens be successful.
I am in love with Janixa Bravo. She is possibly the best, most dedicated person I have ever seen in that director's seat.
I am almost 100% sure that the Santa challenge from All Star 7 would have absolutely flopped if it wasn't for the raw talent of the queens, Janixa's help, and making sure that everyone was doing their greatest. Just like with choreographers, directors who work well with the queens and make them understand rather than just telling them what to do will always make the queens more successful and make the product better. Something that we've seen more recently that I think is the best route, and I still consider acting, is having the queens script it themselves. In season 14, instead of having 2 straight up acting challenges, we had Daytona Wins and then the Super Teas where they scripted it themselves, and I really enjoyed it. Drag Race is no stranger to having the queens plan things out. The branding challenge is obviously a staple now, but when they have complete control over what they're saying in a setting like this, I think it has a lot more potential to be funny rather than if it's scripted and they have to risk ending up with a bad role. The queens know themselves better than anyone else, and they can work with that in order to make the most successful product, while also working with the other queens in a very familiar territory. You cut out the parody to cut out the fluff, and you're giving the audience what they already know, except a lot crazier. It's super fun, and I honestly hope we see more of this. To me, there is one strength about acting challenges that I do really enjoy. There are queens who are extremely funny naturally, but when you give them a script and expect them to be funny as a character, it doesn't always pan out. So seeing the queens who can excel at this, it kind of becomes a sign that they're going to do super well in the competition. People like Simone, Bob, and Evie all did extremely well in their acting challenges and then went on to win the season. It's a very specific talent that plays into the potential of the queens and gives them this professional aura that the producers can continue to push over the course of the season. I think on paper, the challenge looks a lot more simple than it actually is. There's a lot more that goes into it to make a queen shine. So the queens who do end up winning these challenges should be commended because it's a tough challenge to do good at, but the reason they aren't is because no one really likes the ending product. In my opinion though, I do enjoy improv challenges more than the acting challenges. I don't think either one of them are that great, but if you told me to choose between Bossy Rossi and Breast World, I would probably go with Bossy Rossi. Improv and quick humor is just so much easier for queens to do rather than memorizing a script and understanding the source material, so more often than not, there's a lot more funny moments in improv. Even some of the most iconic moments from scripted acting are from queens improving a way to say a line, or just throwing in some dialogue to make the scene funnier.
She's dead!
Oh Lord, she getting back up again.
So cutting out that forced dialogue and allowing the queens to do whatever they want, it helps the scenes a lot more, and also the placements seem a lot more fair because if a queen messes up, it's more on them. Overall, regardless of all the complaining and how much people don't like the challenges, I know this challenge is probably going to stay around because it has been a staple for so long. Obviously, we do need a challenge like this for the sake of variety. We don't want to see like multiple branding challenges a season, but to me, for something that happens every season, it never really feels like they have their priorities straight. Sometimes, yes, they do strike gold and have one of the best episodes of the season, but more often than not, it's predictable and we know exactly what's going to happen before we even see the final product. But hey, when the queens are great and the challenge challenge is great. There's nothing else like it.
Oh, you thirsty bitch?
Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this video was kind of all over the place, but that's where my mind is at right now. I finally found a place to live down in SoCal. I am so excited. It's going to be such a fun move, and I can't wait to show you what I've been working on for so long. There is a lot coming, and I'm trying my best to stay on top of things, but this month is more of a buffer month, if anything. Thank you guys so much for all the support. I'm obviously getting one video out to you each week, but I want to do more in the future, and that's where it's going to be headed. So stay tuned for things in the future. I'm so excited. I'll see you guys soon with another video.